Le programme suivant sera en anglais.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Honorable Professor Emeritus Tan Sri Dato Zulkifli Abdul Razak, Rector of IIUM, Distinguished Professor Dato Dr. Osman Baka, Sheikh al-Kulliyah of International Institute of Islamic Civilization and Malay World ISTAC, Ms. Michelle Campbell, the author of the book, Your Excellencies, Ambassadors and High Commissioners, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen. Greetings and welcome to the book launch and discussion of Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba, a peacemaker for our time. ISTAC Monthly Book Discussion Forum and the launching of ISTAC Unit of Comparative Religion and Intercultural Dialogue. Thank you very much, Your Bahagya. We would like to ask you to remain here to present a token of appreciation. I would like to call upon Distinguished Professor Dr. Osman Baka, who would like to present a token of appreciation to Ms. Michelle Campbell. Please welcome. Thank you very much, Professor Emeritus Tan Sri Dato Zulkifli Abdul Razak, for your encouragement for ISTAC and give us the positive energy and the compass on where ISTAC is heading and how we can move forward. Without further ado, we would like to talk today about Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba, who's a religious leader who produced a prodigious quantity of poems and tracts on mediation, rituals, work, and Quranic study. He led a pacifist struggle against the French colonial empire while not waging outright. We would be starting with our forum for today that is going to be about the book title Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba, a Peacemaker for Our Time by Farah Campbell. This would be chaired by Associate Professor Dr. Daniel Muhammad Yusuf, the Deputy Dean of Academic and Research Unit at ISTAC. And now I would pass the mic to Associate Professor Dr. Daniel Muhammad Yusuf. Please welcome.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we are a bit behind schedule, so I will need to reorganize the timing for this session. But nevertheless, thank you for the invitation, Sister MC. Today, we shall discuss the book Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba, a Peacemaker for Our Time. And it's a pertinent time to discuss this book. As I woke up this morning, there was news of a bombing in Mindanao, yes, of a Roman Catholic church, where 20 died and 81 were injured. And it's especially important that we discuss a figure such as Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba because of his non-violent resistance approach, which is a rarity in the Muslim world, especially in light of the dominance of such negative spotlight that has been given to extremist or terrorist organizations such as ISIS. Especially this is also pertinent because of the fear of foreign fighter returns. Yeah? The foreign fighters returning from the Middle East as ISIS begins to crumble there. So there's a legitimate fear of it coming to this region. And part of that fear was in a way highlighted as to what happened yesterday or today in the news. For this discussion today, I will, of course, first introduce or present or allow the author, Michelle Farah Kimball, to do a presentation, a 15 minutes presentation, more or less, of the book before we go to the respondents from ISTAC, Prof. Kamaunia, Kamaruzaman, as well as Dr. Imtiaz Yusof. Before that, allow me to read a bit from the sleeve of the book by way of introducing Michelle Farah Kimball. The author received her Bachelor of Arts from the University of California at Santa Cruz with honors. She pursued graduate studies in Near Eastern Studies at University California, Berkeley, and received her MA from Santa Barbara. She compiled the book Muslim Women Throughout the World and annotated bibliography and has written articles on Rumi, Sohrawardi, Islamic spirituality, and women in Islam. Kimball founded the International Peace Project, and in the 1990s, she took up the cause of the plight of the Iraqi people, especially children, suffering under sanctions and bombardment. She made an aid trip there with 80 others to show support and deliver medicines while risking imprisonment. Kimball wrote articles about her experiences, including Let the Children Live, and made media appearances, gave lectures, and organized many events focusing on global peace initiatives. Kimball also lectured at interfaith gatherings with fellow Christian, Jewish, Hindu, and Buddhist colleagues, and hosted Chaldean Catholic Archbishop Gabriel Kasab, and organized events to support his work in Iraq. She is one of the first signatories to A Common Word Between Us and You, an open letter by Islamic scholars to Christian leaders calling for peace and understanding. She also produced a CD of mystical chants dedicated to world peace. While committed to working for peace, she hosted Senegalese president candidate Sheikh Abdoulaye Dieye, who introduced her to the work of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba.
This is Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba. He was born in 1854 and died in 1927. But to this day, you see his image all over Senegal and West Africa, on walls and buses and on trees, and photocopies are put on shops. And he's a living presence. Even though, you know, he died in 1927, he had a tremendous impact on the country of Senegal and its people. So there are mystical and magical stories that abound about him and what he did. So why is he still important today? Well, just to give a brief introduction, I came to know about Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba through this man, Sheikh Abdoulaye Dieye, who was a follower of the teachings of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, but he was also a member of parliament in Senegal. His son now is a member of parliament, and he happened to be running for president of Senegal when I met him. And he was globetrotting around the world, speaking at the United Nations and World Conference of Religions and other places, and often about global peace. I was heavily involved in peace activism at the time, and he was also speaking a lot about peace around the world. And I had just come back from war-torn Iraq, as you mentioned, on a peace humanitarian aid mission. So when he related to me the story of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, this Muslim Gandhi type figure who lived in a time of foreign domination, invasion, and oppression, much like we see in war-ravaged countries today that are reeling from violence. But the thing is, he was totally dedicated to bringing peace through and social change through nonviolence. And Sheikh Abdoulaye Dieye told me much more, but it seemed an amazing story that people needed to know about. So as a peace activist, I thought I should let people know about this figure. and I began gathering information. So Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba had a philosophy much like Gandhi and Martin Luther King regarding the power of nonviolence. He was also a great literary luminary as well. And like them, Bamba was imprisoned, and he was not in the favor of the governing powers that be. And like them, he was religiously and spiritually inspired, each of them from a different religious tradition. But Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba believed that the greatest battle was with oneself, with one's own soul. And he taught the importance of seeking, knowing, and standing up for the truth. Not in a confrontational kind of way, but by living that truth. Now, around the time that Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba was born in 1854, slavery was supposedly ending, but the psychological scars of this still ran deep, as millions of people had been extracted from Africa. And so now, as wounds were still healing, the French colonialists, led by, early on by this man, Louis Faidherbe, were infiltrating to pacify Senegal. And not only Senegal, but with a plan to dominate Africa from the west coast, where Senegal is, to the east coast, to gain control of valuable resources and to avoid taxes, but also they wanted to benefit African people by introducing French culture through their civilizing mission. So they introduced the French language and French schools, and they diminished the number of Islamic and native schools. So they hoped to transform Africans into French men and women, even giving citizenship to some people, French citizenship, that is. And, but obviously there was resistance to this kind of foreign encroachment. And there ensued many battles, not just by Muslim jihadists, but also traditional African chiefs. So Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba was not from a family of warriors, but he was from a family of educators. And he devoted his life to gaining religious and spiritual knowledge at the feet of sages, some of whom were his own family members, because he came from a family of scholars. But he witnessed the battles of resistance against the French colonialists, the killings and the bloodshed, and members of his own family were kidnapped and killed. His own sister at the age of 9 was kidnapped and sold into slavery. These horrific events continued while he attempted to pursue his studies. As he grew older and gained more knowledge, and when I say older, well, he was quite young at when these big battles were beginning, but even in his early 20s, he had started to write booklets and became quite popular. So he often versified texts of the classical Islamic texts and versified them into beautiful poetry that people would chant to know better. And he became so popular in sharing this knowledge that crowds of people came to learn from him. Over time, he developed a system of education in which he incorporated spiritual purification according to the concept of ihsan or tasawwuf in traditional Islamic studies. Now, he also included all the other aspects of Islamic studies, but ihsan was particularly important, that he wanted people to actually incorporate this into the whole educational system. which he created. And Ihsan, as you know, is to beautify the soul. And that through guidance, through religious and spiritual practice and guidance. So Bamba had a great effect, but he never set out to resist the French colonialists, but he did not physically oppose the French in what they were doing, but he peacefully sought to educate people. He and his representatives established schools and mosques. In every little town that they would go to, they would establish a school and a mosque. And crowds came to them to learn, because Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba exuded wisdom. And, but with the amount of people that were coming to visit him, the French became very suspicious, because they couldn't tell the difference between people gathering around a wise man or people gathering around to perhaps create an army to fight them. So they were already fighting and killing whatever opposition came to them, and they had the military might to stop the opposition. And there were raging battles of Maba, Jahuba, Lat Dior, and others. But Bamba was principled in his stance, and he was not subservient to the French in any way. But to the French people, it was an affront to them that Bamba, Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, declared that he recognized one God as the ultimate authority, when they viewed themselves in the role of the highest authority of the land. So, in fact, the French posted the following telegram back to France from Senegal: urgent, Ahmadou Bamba is making it known that he recognizes no other master but God and refuses to be summoned for an interview. Situation particularly grave. Now, that was a very serious statement by the French at the time. So the French decided to keep Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba in their radar. They surveilled him. And when they learned he went on retreats outside of their area of control, they became very suspicious. Now, in his retreats, he was deeply inspired, not to go and fight the French, but to set out to find a sacred city, a blessed sanctuary for which he said he had permission from God to establish on earth. And he set out into the wilderness alone, inhabited apparently by lions and hyenas and panthers, in search of the divine light of this sacred city, which did not yet exist on earth. Now, he was to name this city Touba. And Touba means blessedness or happiness. And it's mentioned just one time in the Quran. Alladhina amanu wa amilu salihati Touba lahum wa husnu ma'ab. Those who attain to faith and righteous deeds are destined for Touba, that is happiness, blessedness, in this world, and a beautiful place of final return. Now, when the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, would be reciting the Quran various times, people would say, what is Touba? Because this is this very special place that people who do good deeds and who have faith will go to. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, answered, Touba is a tree that is in paradise. The extent of its shade is equal to a 100-year walk, and the clothes of heaven's inhabitants originate from its flowers. So Bamba was making a connection between the divine Touba, the transcendent spiritual Touba, which is promised to people who do good, and the horizontal plane of the earth. And he was establishing this potential connection. And he was able to discover the location of Touba in his roamings in the desert, in the savannah, excuse me. He had dreams with flashes of light when he was near the place, and he found a baobab tree in the location where Touba would be. And according to oral history, he established a mosque in the baobab tree, first provisional mosque of Touba. As he continued to gain popularity, many of the village chiefs became exceedingly jealous of him, not just them, but other people too, members of his family even. The chiefs began to kind of side with the French regarding this troublemaker, Amadou Bamba, and they slandered Amadou Bamba, and they said that Sheikh Amadou Bamba was dangerous, and he had weapons, and he was planning a militant uprising against the French, which was not true, because Amadou Bamba already was very peaceful and dedicated to nonviolence. So in 1895, the French decided they didn't want to deal with this man anymore. They decided to come and arrest Sheikh Amadou Bamba. So escorted by 200 soldiers and cavalry on horses, they came and they forced Sheikh Amadou Bamba from his peaceful home. And for all anyone knows, he could have been being taken to his death, because the French usually would not allow people to live who were in opposition to them. But in that moment, when Sheikh Amadou Bamba was taken by the soldiers, he felt he was divinely protected. In fact, he desired to reach the high spiritual stature of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, who faced their oppressors at the Battle of Badr, B-A-D-R, where the believers were outnumbered 3-1, and apparently by divine intervention, they prevailed. But he wrote beautiful poems in honor of these companions, who must have had exceeding courage, high level of courage in order to be able to do what they did, to be willing to go out and die for the truth. His exquisite poetry, what Sheikh Amadou Bamba writes, is really quite beautiful to listen to. It's mesmerizing, and it's not like other Muslim music you've probably heard, Arabic or other Muslim music. It's got a distinct African cadence and rhythm to it. So Sheikh Amadou Bamba's prayer to achieve nearness in rank, in spiritual rank, with the companions was fulfilled as he wrote about that moment of being escorted away by these soldiers to prison. So he writes, "I was walking with the truthful when I walked into exile. I was with the righteous people of Badr. While my persecutors were confident I was in their presence, he knew that he was not a prisoner of the French colonialists inwardly, that he knew he was going to something that may be treacherous, but that which would bring him closer to God. So he was escorted to court for a hearing, and he was there for several hours, and the authorities came to the conclusion that he was menacing, troubling, and disturbing the tranquility of the region. So they decided to send him so far away he could have no influence in Senegal anymore. And perhaps they were, again, sending him to his own death for all anyone knew, reminiscent of people sent off on slave ships, never to return again. They put him in chains, like they used to do with the slaves, and exiled him and shipped him off on an old Portuguese ship to where he didn't know where he was going. Even on the ship, he didn't know where he was going, nor did his followers know where he was going. This is a painting done much later showing the angels supporting him and depicting a story of him praying on the water. So he was sent to the French Congo, Gabon, 3,000 miles away from Senegal. Now that's a tremendous distance, especially back then in 1895. So who's to think he would come back? And people they had exiled there before, in fact, did not come back alive, such as the Guinean war chief Samori Touré, who died of pneumonia there. So the French expected that that was going to be the end of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, and he would not survive this trial. So I'm skipping ahead for time, but he managed to stay alive in Gabon for 7 years, suffering trials and tribulations so difficult that he said he wouldn't even write about them. And he resided in solitude and in unsafe conditions without succumbing to famine and fatal endemic diseases that other people had succumbed to there. Nonetheless, he was able to write inspiring poetry while there. So his dedicated followers, when they found out that he was indeed alive and he was there, they solicited to have him released. And after 7 years in the jungles, he was able to return to Senegal with allegedly trunks of writings that he had done. So when he returned to Senegal, there were crowds of people that came around to see who was this man who was able to survive 7 years in the Congo, miraculously, it seemed. And he again began to draw crowds, a lot of crowds of people coming to learn from him. Especially, he had these beautiful poetry of wisdom and songs. So within 6 months of his return to Senegal from Gabon, the French decided to exile him again. Yet this time to a completely different place, and that was to the Sahara Desert in Mauritania. Now, the Sahara Desert was a completely different kind of place because it was known to have amazing spiritual and religious leaders and great scholars of Islam beyond what Senegal had. And Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba decided to go a little bit deeper into the Sahara, and he was inspired with and received the weird or the special prayers and formulas and verses of the Quran specifically for this new spiritual order that he was founding. So this exile for him, whereas the other one was one of trials and tribulations, this exile for him was one of consecration, of his purpose in life. And it was exceptional that here Arabs came in the middle of the desert, came to learn from him, a black man, that they encouraged him as they acknowledged him as their spiritual leader. And they did not look favorably on Senegalese because they considered themselves more noble in their religious knowledge. So after several years of being there, once again, people solicited for him to return to Senegal. And he was able to return, and the French, when he came back, the French again put him under house arrest. So he was not allowed to, he was only allowed to stay in certain places, and he had to get permission if he wanted to go anywhere or travel anywhere. So he was not allowed to be in his blessed sacred city of Touba, which then was just a little village. This is Touba now, which is a lot different. This was built on the sacred site that Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba had searched for and found in the savannah, and upon which he recited the prayer of Abraham, "O God, make this city a place of peace and serenity." So it was developed and became the second largest city in Senegal, and today it has a population of over 500,000 people with a yearly pilgrimage of millions of people, and it's the biggest pilgrimage in all of Africa for Muslims. And essentially, when the pilgrimage occurs once a year for several days, the entire country is affected because so many people are headed to Touba. So there's traffic jammed up for miles, and people jump on buses and hang from the sides of cars and climb on top, whatever they can to get there. The president and the political leaders and members of spiritual orders travel to honor the sanctity of the place, Touba, and its founder. And even members of other spiritual orders, the Tijaniya, the Qadiriya, they understand that this was a holy man and that he gave a great gift to the people of Senegal. So Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba said he recognized that this city would be a great city. And he said that people of many walks of life, he said, people will come from the lands and the seas, and I will not cause any harm to them. Essentially, it has happened that people of many walks of life travel to the pilgrimage from other countries. And he's gradually becoming more well-known in the United States and other places in the world. Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba and other spiritual leaders of the time in Senegal helped to effect tremendous change without ever picking up weapons. And I'm skipping through a lot, for time, but you can, read the details in the book. So Senegal remains one of the few African nations to have not experienced the great turmoil of other African countries. And Bamba believed that by traversing the spiritual path, according to the precepts of revealed religion, revealed knowledge, one gains discernment of the truth. And by this, people become empowered within and less likely to be subject to foreign domination or any kind of domination. So through his writings and teachings, based on the Islamic and intellectual spiritual tradition, he and other spiritual leaders in Senegal helped bring about a cultural and spiritual revival in spite of the French presence. Let's go to the next one. Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba's philosophy was inspired by the Quran and the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. And he came earlier, but his philosophy echoes the conviction of Martin Luther King Jr. and Gandhi regarding the power of nonviolence. Gandhi's approach directly influenced Martin Luther King, who argued that the Gandhian nonviolent philosophy provided the only morally and practically sound method open to oppressed people in their struggle for freedom. So Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba believed that he had a mandate from God to not harm anything. When the French authorities sent a spy disguised as a follower to check on him before he was exiled the first time, and because they had heard he was gathering weapons to foment rebellion, which of course was not true, he intuitively knew the spy's agenda and said, I have agreed to certain conditions with God, such that even if the Mahdi, that is the prophesied end-time redeemer of the world in Islam who comes back with the Messiah, so he says, even if the Mahdi descends on earth, I would not assist him in battle. I will not kill neither scorpion nor serpent, nor anything that is living. According to the direction I have taken, it is absolutely forbidden for me to shoot from a weapon, such that even if the Mahdi were to arrive, and if I were to take up arms, my mission would be lost. Thank you.
Thank you, Farah. Now we go to the first of our respondents, who is Professor Dr. Kamaronia Kamaruzzaman. She is a professor of comparative religion and amongst the pioneers of IUM academic staff in May 1983. I think I was 10 at this time. She still serves the university today as the head of the Unit of Comparative Religion and Intercultural Dialogue. Prior to this, she was with the Department of Usuluddin and Comparative Religion. She's also the designer of the comparative religion discipline in IUM. At IUM, she was also the founder, director of the International Center for the Alliance of Civilization, which was allied to the United Nations Alliance of Civilization from 2012 to 2015. And then as deputy director of the International Institute of Muslim Unity from 2015 to 2017. Professor Kamaronia was also the chairperson for the NGO's meet of the first World Muslim Women's Summit and Exhibition, WISE 2016, organized by IUM and the World Islamic Forum, Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC, as well as various Malaysian ministries. This was in September 2016. She was also key resource person of the Harmony Center of the Islamic Religious Council of Singapore, or MUIS, in 2012. With that, I present Professor Kamaronia to deliver her response.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And good morning to my Buddhist friends. I'm meeting new friends and saying hello to old friends. It's been a long time. They were here actually for our Muslim Buddhist discussion on family ethics some time ago. Before I start on this, I want to thank, of course, the rector for gracing our occasion and Sister Farah Kimball for enlightening me on this. But allow me the opportunity here to say something before I go into the book, to thank Professor Zol, the rector, for that type of support and promises and inspiration. I am the firstborn of his tech. I was the first student, and I remember those days when Prof. Nakib Al-Atas, I was the first student because of destiny. My professor, supposedly to be my supervisor, I was in temple with Prof. Osman Bakar. He was assassinated together with his wife. I think you know about this, 1986. The nights before they were assassinated, during the morning, the night, we call her Mama, dearly loved Professor Lamia Farouki, wrote me a letter. I was then studying in Tunisia to catch up with Arabic and English. And nobody dared tell me of the incident, not my family, not my friends, until I got a telegram from Professor Kamal Hassan to inform. And of course, like everything went silence for me. I refused to go back, but I was already embarking on scholarship like Prof. Osman with Professor Al-Attas, attending his talks. I used to tell him, Prof, I'm afraid of you, because he's he has that type of structure. I'm afraid of you, I don't understand your writings, but I want to learn from you. And when I first walked into his room, he looked at me, he didn't say anything, and he laughed. And we had lessons in his house. So when this tragedy happened, I refused to go back. It was too traumatic, and I had the support of Prof. Kamal Hassan. He knew what I went through, because we always have very personal relationship with our professors. Prof. Osman will be able to watch with Al-Farouki, especially. So when the idea of his tag came out, he rushed his tag so that I would be in time able to take the scholarship. So I have this great gratitude to Prof. Al-Attas. So I enrolled, as I enrolled in IIUM, before it was officially established. I have confidence that it's going to float. It is my mission there. So I would like to thank you, Prof. Zol, for giving back us the light. It had been very difficult for us. And on behalf of my siblings, some of them are here, sorry if I get moved. The last few years were very painful for us. You have given us back the light. On behalf of my siblings, I thank you. May Allah bless you. To you and Prof. Osman Bakar, who has given back the life of his tag and bringing back the soul that was taken away from it. And on behalf of my professors, my intellectual parents, which I thank you also. They'll be very happy, and you have the blessings. And most of all, on behalf of Prof. Al-Attas, at this time in his life, at this age, above 80, this is the thing that he really needed. We have our greatest gratitude. I'm sorry, Sister Farah. It's just that I need to say this, yeah? And I think I speak for everybody. And we have all the supporters of and friends of his tag here. Tan Sri Hamid. Hamid Aga, sorry, I'm getting, Hamid Alba was there when his tag was officiated in the presence of the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, and Altas. I'm so happy he is again here with us. He's always been with us. That he heard it from you straight away. So he's another Tan Sri Rashid Hussein caliber for his tag. The last time I was trying to fish them into his tag, alhamdulillah, I managed. So thank you very much. And now I'll go into this thing. For Sister Farah Kimball, I'm grateful for you to have written this book. Personally, the African countries is something very remote for me. So I took some time as I read through and I traveled through the life of Bamba, let's just call him Bamba. As I traveled through his life that you presented, I also traveled through the history of Africa. Now let me just share this with you. Africa as a community, Africans, to Malaysians are very remote. In fact, my father's generation hardly see an African. It was only when IIUM was set up, and we have many African brothers, people got excited just seeing them. And the students brought them to the kampung, and they were pampered. And then, of course, when Malaysia embarked into this educational hub, more of Africans came here. So as I read through your book, I also went through the Google to and to see where these places are. I'm trying to get this sort of perspective. So I thank you for that. You not only give me this man, who is this peace activist, you also give me a history of Africa. You also put me in the context of the struggle of that time, some of which I can relate, some I need to learn along the line. And of course, you've given to us, you know, a kind of a glitter. As you know, we, the Muslim today, I need not go into that, you know, the situation we are. In a way, I can say this, that we don't have a sense of direction. We don't know whether we're in north, east, south, or west. We don't even see the compass. We're looking at the GPS into this language, right? The only destination that we can hit on is Jannah, paradise. But other than that, we're just groping. We need to pull together. And what the director has beautifully put is that in that context of giving the direction, the academics in particular. And there is nowhere better than to get discussions of these makers along the way. Now, I want to thank you for this thing, not just giving me the side of Bamba, but also give me the history. And actually, a lot of these books is about the history of that part of the history of Africa, of Senegal, and history of the Tasawwuf, the Sufi movement there. And it is remarkable because often we hear of conflicts, clan conflicts, you know, sectarian conflicts, even NGOs conflict, and Sufi conflicts. But it doesn't seem to appear in Senegal. So I'm very impressed because I have come across of one Sufi group versus another Sufi group, and it became issue. But it doesn't seem to, because in the life of Bamba, he incorporated all, right? His own group is the Muridia, but also the other groups, the other tariqat, also part of him. I think that's the him. So he started with him being the enveloper, yeah, of all the differences even in the tariqah. Now, if he's able to do that, because as you know, one tariqat versus another tariqat can be very problematic, but he's able to envelop and embrace all. And so, because he's able to do that, so he is the exemplar. Now, what we miss is this exemplar figure. And of course, if you go into Islamic history, as Prof. Al-Atas used to say, the Prophet has to come first. There's, as an example, there's an education, Islamic education, he said, must start with the university. Because then only, you cannot start with the kindergarten. And in the university, it must start with the postgraduate. That is why we have ISTEC. And it must start with the professors, because there must be a model. And to borrow Confucius, the Chunzu, so that people know where to go. We today have lost this. We have not even known well enough the Prophet. And believe you me, we talk so much about Islam. We talk less about the Prophet. We talk even less about Allah. Even our priorities. And when I was asked somewhere in conversations, what is happening to us? I said, I think, and I fear this, we have moved away from the worshipping of Allah to the worshipping of Islam. Islam and religions have more grip on us than Allah himself. So even this priority, right? And some even make the ummah. And so they fight ummah, they kill the ummah in the name of the ummah, doing exactly what Allah tells us not to do. So I think we need to go back. And I see in the life of Bamba, the emphasis on Allah, the emphasis on the Prophet. So I can relate, because I'm also going through, this fear. And, it is beautiful that in our Salat, many times Al-Fatiha. Ihdina siratal mustaqim. Keep us on that path. Unintentionally, we have, even in a day, how many times we read Al-Fatiha to make sure that that path, that siratal mustaqim, we already know it, but we keep on repeating it as a kind of a wirid, a mantra, because there is this possibility. So Allah has seemed to be fading from the background of the fights of today. So this is this thing. And I like to quote a few things about this thing. You said this on page 16. The legacy of Bamba. It is a spiritual legacy. His legacy on spirituality, which is non-violence, found in this educational system, in his politics, his contribution, right? Legacy of Bamba. His legacy to the African cultural identity. Although he embraced French as a language, you use one word later, but I have missed that. Yeah. But keeping it still in the African identity. So you can speak French, but you leave the African identity. And you said also that he gave an integral practice of Islam. And this I find, as you explained along the line, how he did it. Although this is a Sufi order, a Sufi movement, it was also an economic empire in a way. An economic empire rooted in the needs of the people, not in the greed of the people. Exactly, right? And whatever gifts he had, he passed it back. So he didn't know who gave, he didn't know what the gifts are, it goes back to the people. So as I look at it, I saw this as what? A tariqah with a worldly concern, an economy that is based on needs as versus on greed. And you said that above all is the peace in society. And in a way, when you said somewhere that Senegal has that sort of independence, that atmosphere, it did not see the violence. It reminds me of Malaysia, in a way. We have our own character, we have our ups and downs, we have geniuses, we have also idiots. We have our idiosyncrasies, but we were never violent. There were times when we forgot, missed that. But the judicious, I call it the judicious wisdom and the pragmatic wisdom of the people of Malaysia, my friends from Buddhism, is there, and we intend to keep it that way and grow further on that. So there is this reflection of Senegal Islamization process and the Malaysian Islamization process. It's not going to be, and I like this statement that you quote from him. When they was when the authorities were sort of trying to, to hijack him into their own thinking, and he mentioned names of those great fighters. Difficult for me to pronounce them. One statement, he said, "Where are they now?" So all these great heroes who shed blood, self-proclaimed champions of the people, where are they now? It's people like him that lived through his legacy. And coming back to, do I have some? Yes. Coming back to our bringing Bamba into ISTEC. Bamba has given me that inspiration of sustained, we call it sustained resistance to unhealthy, political activities. He's not, I will consider him, I don't know much about Gandhi. I'm not a peace activist, but I love what they're doing. They refer to him as what? Passive resistance, that's the word. But in Bamba, I see more like sustained resistance. Because it's continue and continue, because the legacy of Gandhi sort of, has thrown away, but the legacy of Bamba lives on. So it's a continuous, sustained sort of resistance, and that resistance is jihad fi nafs. That is the number one. It's all lasting. So I like to see it in that sense, and in this context of what I call popularist explanation of Islam, we certainly need this type. We need to call our wits together, and under the leadership of Prof. Osman Bakar, who's able to bring the past into the present and into the future for Islam, inshallah, God willing, there will be, and inshallah soon, we hope, the GPS of the Muslim Ummah somehow can be seen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, first of all, I mistakenly omitted to thank you very much to the rector, Professor Tan Sri Dato Zulkifli Abdurazak, and also Professor Datuk Dr. Osman Bakar, and all of the staff at ISTAC for organizing this and arranging this. It's such a pleasure to be in this amazing physical space, but also it's a delight for me to be here with all of you. And I'm sorry I didn't say that at the beginning. So maybe to address some of the issues that were brought up. First, since it's so fresh, what you were saying about the government in Senegal, I'm not sure I know who you were referring to. Are they Senegalese people that you mentioned? Okay. Oh, how much they're influenced. Oh, okay. All right. Okay. All right. Well, there is a book out by Villalon, Villalon, and he's referred to in my book. But he does talk about the government and how the government is so intertwined with the spiritual orders, and that there's a very unique way that this government in Senegal is run. It's a secular government, and they use many of the much of the French legal system, but they have a relationship, a kind of an intertwined relationship with the spiritual orders and the spiritual leaders. And in fact, many people in Senegal would not want a religious scholar to be president of the country. But they prefer this kind, and in fact, I'm not an expert on this. I'm sure some other people here know more than I do, but in Islam, it's not normal. The religious scholars were not the ones who were the rulers necessarily, but they did their job. And in Senegal, there's an interesting balance in which the government goes to, they pay their respects to the spiritual leaders, because so much of their constituency are followers of, within one of the three spiritual orders. So if they're dealing with a agricultural issue or a political issue or an economic issue, all of the citizenry, in fact, Villalon, if you look him up, I think you'll find a lot of the answers that you're looking for, but he calls the people, the citizens, he calls them citizen disciples, because they all belong to a spiritual order. They all have spiritual guides by which they, lead their lives. And this is what was set up not just by Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, but the other religious leaders in the Tijaniya and the Qadariya. And they were just equally as important. It's not just the Mercredi, but Ahmadou Bamba happens to be more visible because his picture is everywhere, and he went into exile, so the French in some ways made him more famous, by sending him off. It had the opposite effect that they wanted. So as far as I can tell, people are deeply affected because their whole lives usually revolve around, in some way or another, these spiritual orders, and they're the leaders of the orders. It's just part of society. So, you know, it's my impression that the political leaders are very much influenced in that way. I hope I sort of answered your question somewhat. And then what you were saying about the revelation and Gabriel, and how could somebody now receive this, you know, or see Gabriel and be inspired, or and that's the whole thing also about the teaching of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba. And then Sheikh Abdullah J, who I met, who was traveling around the world as a politician, who was running for president, and who was a member of the parliament. But he was going around giving prophetic teachings. And he believed that politicians should be like the prophets and should feed the poor and heal the sick. So, you know, and within these spiritual orders, there's a lot of this aspect. And in the teachings of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, and you know, you were, I'm not sure if it was you or which one of you were saying that, you know, the politics that Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, that is inspired by him, it's not so much a tactical kind of way of politics or organizing society, but it's a prophetic. It comes from something deeper. And so that wars or anything, you know, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was a pacifist for 13 years. I mean, he would not take up arms. But when he did, and when they were forced to in order to survive, it was a prophetic impetus. It was not, I want to go chop off the heads of people, you know, or like what we see in the current day, you know, fundamentalism and everything. So even, you know, Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba said that, you know, the last farewell address of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and this is an interpretation by him, and is that the Prophet said, you know, there's no more bloodshed anymore. We have come back into Mecca. We have established ourselves. Islam is not, well, I don't know, I mean, in America and other places, I don't, but Islam is very established. And so there's a kind of a tactical philosophy, and then there's a, you know, a prophetic way of being. This is what Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba teaches. And so as far as Gabriel, and of course people believe okay, this was the prophet who was able to see or experience Gabriel. But in the spiritual orders, you know, one is supposed to develop one's character and to live the Quran and the teachings of Islam such that you become like these people, like the companions, like what Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba was trying to achieve. And so once you kind of embody the truth of the Quran, why shouldn't someone be able to see, you know, the angel Gabriel? You know, of course, they're not going to be like a prophet, but you know, there is an inner life and stuff which is missing from, you know, all of this sort of fundamentalism, and where they're teaching the outward teachings, you know, the order in which you cut your fingernails that's, you know, they consider that Islam. But according to these teachings, Islam is about unity, is about oneness, you know, oneness of God. Sheikh Abdullah J, who was member of parliament running for president, his political slogan was Allahu Wahidun, God is one. And every time anyone would see him, they'd raise up their finger and they'd say, you know, God is one. And he taught this around the world for all religions. He had Jewish followers, Christian followers, etc. And Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba he still called the French people of the book, you know. So that is kind of the depth of the spirituality, and I hope I'm answering your question. As far as Black Africa, I apologize. I feel uncomfortable when I say that, Black, but you have to understand, like in Mauritania, there's a word for the Arabs, and the Arabs are white. They're called Badat, and I have the word anyway. And so the Arabs are white, and they don't, you know, at that time they didn't respect it. But I'm going to take that which you said, and I don't want to use that because I can understand how that could be yes, offensive. And I think, what does it matter? You know, the color of the skin, and you know, define somebody. It's uncomfortable. So thank you for raising it. And then let's see. Oh yes. And then you were talking about Ghazali and human being building. You know, Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, one of the things he wanted to develop the country of Senegal by helping to develop people. And he wanted people to be able to transform themselves within, transform their hearts and their character. So that is how he saw building a country, you know, or the politics. And this is also how the politics of Sheikh Abdullah J, who I met, was, and he was trying to do this for Senegal too, is that to, you know, people become empowered by the truth and by purifying the heart and being able to discern the truth and the difference between right and wrong. So, yeah, so you were talking about Al-Ghazali in that context. And then that you read about Touba, and, you know, yes, there were other philosophers who talked about Touba. Did you say in Iran? Yeah, no.
Farah Kimball, thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
على من علي ولا زادي